Hey, welcome. This is Greg with Engaging History. Today we're going to look at a Vietnam War map activity. First, let's take a look at the quote of the week. Good teaching is 1/4 preparation and 3/4 theater, from Gail Godwin. Remember, we study history to understand our world, avoid past mistakes, and appreciate other cultures. As always, this lesson aims to be both fun and challenging for students. So the Vietnam War is something that's often studied in high school U.S. history classes or even world history classes, and it is of course one of many theaters of the larger Cold War. For the purpose of this lesson, I have my students start with a blank map of Vietnam, and by the end they have an information-packed resource, as you see here on the right, that helps to visualize and put in context what happened in the Vietnam War. I'm going to take you through a few of the steps in making this map to give you an idea of what it's all about. But first, let's put a little bit more context around the Vietnam War. When I go about teaching on the Cold War, I actually break it up into 3 different units: 1940s and 50s, 1960s and 70s, and then 1980s and 90s, or the close of the Cold War. The Cold War, of course, refers to the war of ideology between capitalist United States and the Western world and communist Russia or the Soviet Union. In the 1960s and 70s is where the Cold War really begins to heat up. You can see many of the items that I talk about in my units here on the screen. And you might make the argument that there is no greater conflict within the context of the Cold War than the Vietnam War. I know a lot of teachers that teach the Vietnam War in its own larger unit. So as you go about looking at this map activity, the teacher controls the pace. With each click of the mouse, it brings up a new item on the map with information to talk about and for students to add to their map. By the end, students will have surrounding nations and their involvement in the war, different capitals, landmarks, and their significance to the war, and the major events and turning points in the war. Let me show you a few sample slides. Nearby Thailand was militarily aligned with the United States. I asked my students on their maps to draw a few airplanes and label them USAF, United States Air Force, to show that this is where the United States used air bases in the Vietnam War. Thailand is also the country most friendly to the Hmong people, which we'll see on the next slide. Another step, I asked my students to label Laos and Cambodia, and then to draw in some of this area where the Hmong people lived. They helped the United States in the Vietnam War with the expectation that after we won, which we didn't, that they would establish their own nation. Later, as the United States pulled out of Vietnam, the Hmong people were left as enemies to the governments of Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. By the end, this resource talks about the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the tunnels around Saigon, the 17th parallel, which once split North and South Vietnam, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, the Tet Offensive, and much more. Here are a few student samples from recent lessons to give you an idea of the final product. Thank you so much for watching. Take a minute to like and subscribe. I hope this helps you as you design a lesson on the Cold War or the Vietnam War in particular. I will link this lesson as well as many others below.